So I will go ahead and admit if you clicked on this video, it does have a bit of a funny title. Jivas are gay as fuck. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's go ahead and define it. So, first off, Jiva is a word that a lot of people might not be too familiar with. It's coming from Hinduism, and it more or less is going to point to who you are in the more temporary sense. So, at least in this life, in a more human sense, it's going to point to your sense of self having a body, having this body, being this person. For me, it's being Brandon Rowe. The whole storyline behind that, more you could call it ego, is a rough translation, although the word ego still has a lot of associations to psychology, which can kind of throw people off. That's kind of why I'm liking this word jiva. I first ran into it on Jason Gregory's YouTube channel, who is a great person to check out if you're interested in all of this non-dual awakening sort of stuff, any sort of Eastern spirituality, just the tried and true awakening path of like Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, all of that kind of stuff he's going to go into in pretty great detail. So I would highly recommend him as a source if you're into this stuff and are looking to develop yourself spiritually, if you're looking to awaken further. But yeah, so that gets into what the term jiva means. Jiva is more or less your ego, your sense of self in the more temporary way. So, the alternative to the jiva is the Atman, sort of your true nature. And that more or less is the consciousness and the awareness that is always present whenever there is a jiva there. There's this underlying element or easier to miss element that there is this sort of timeless awareness that everything is happening sort of on. If we could maybe in a simplified way think of an analogy, a metaphor, that the Atman is more or less the canvas if we're thinking about a painting, or if we're thinking about a movie, it's more or less the screen. Although these are kind of hit or miss, they're not perfect ways of thinking about this, but for the sense of giving you a picture of what we're talking about, the Atman is kind of like the movie screen. Whatever's shown on the movie screen, whatever happens in awareness, the particular things, the appearances that come onto the screen, or the things that get painted onto the blank canvas, that sort of stuff, that temporary activity, that temporary activity is like the jiva, is like you as an individual entity, a human being, feeling like you have a real existence, a real sense of self that can be threatened. That's like what your jiva is. And it's sort of like what's happening on the movie screen. Of course, when we watch a movie, the screen is showing us different images, different appearances, different scenes throughout the whole movie. The screen is seeming to change the whole time, although the screen itself is not changing. It's what is on the screen, it's what the screen is presenting to you. That is what's changing. And that's what we're talking about here when we say a jiva. It's that thing that isn't the eternal you. It isn't the true self. It isn't any sort of transcendent reality. It is what is just happening in the moment, and it is going to pass. It is going to change. We know from science that our physical body, almost all the cells in it are going to replace themselves. If you think about yourself in a psychological sense, your personality is going to change over time, more or less. Your likes and dislikes are going to change. The type of food that you really love is going to change a bit. Everything is going to be altered to some degree. And when we look at this and we try to find a sort of solid entity that is the self, if we're looking on the level of appearances and on the level of like a human personality, that isn't a reliable thing to base an identity upon. And that's why when we get into seeing our human identity as the true reality, it causes a lot of problems for us. Quick side note, when I say gay as fuck, I think you guys know what I mean. It's kind of like middle school lingo, a little immature. It's just saying, Jivas kind of suck. I'm also wearing pink here as a bit of a joke because, I'm not some like transphobic or homophobic person. I have no issues with any of that. I was just kind of using. I mean, it's a bit of a catching phrase, more or less. Maybe it'll turn people off to the video more than onto it. We'll see. But I just think the title's funny. So anyway, yeah, the temporary self that can pull us into a world of suffering and into a world of measurement, which is more or less what the term Maya means in Hinduism. It does translate to illusion, but it's also an illusion of a particular sort, I've been learning more and more recently through different sources. Jason Gregory's YouTube channel, again, another great source for kind of getting into these terms, seeing more definite and more based in reality, based in the actual traditions themselves, seeing the definitions in that way. So Maya more means the illusion of measurement. It's not just that the whole world is illusion, it's more that when we begin to measure, compare, and contextualize the world, there is an illusion that occurs there because the world isn't actually split into all these parts. We're mentally compartmentalizing reality. When we look at reality through the human lens, through the temporary personality matrix, when we're trying to divvy up all of these different things, and I say, okay, water in this cup is good. It's good for my survival. Therefore, I might crave this water. Now, from a human relative sense, if we want to survive, it's fucking great to have water. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's more that when we allow ourselves to get too caught up in the temporary happenings of the world, we can lose sight of the truth that there is a more fundamental nature to ourselves than just this temporary game. Now, plenty of you people who have watched my YouTube channel before will probably be up to speed to a degree with this sort of thinking, these sort of, you could call them philosophies of looking at the world. The classic Eastern spirituality, Eastern awakening, enlightenment sort of stuff. You might be up to speed with that. But either way, that lays a bit of a groundwork for what we're going to be talking about. Now, what I really want to get into with this is that, Jivas are gay as fuck, whether you're realized or not. The human reality of what you are, that temporary changing reality, which is not necessarily the deepest level or most fundamental or true level of what you are, when you're operating too much on that human level, which can happen even after you've awakened or come to some level of realization of the self or of the non-self, the non-substantiality of self. If we're going to talk about anatta in Buddhism, which deals with what the self is or isn't, similar to Hinduism, but just in a different sort of way. When we look at this more or less problem of what our temporary selves are, if we get too caught up in the everyday happenings, we can lose sight of that beautiful nature that's present at all times. No matter what's happening on the movie screen, the screen itself has some beautiful qualities to it. Some people would even say it's all beautiful. It is the very essence of beauty, love, truth, tranquility, equanimity. We can get all caught up in that too a little bit, seeing reality only through an absolute lens or only through this true nature or Atman lens. This can cause problems too. But I think it's more common for people on the awakening path, on the path towards the sort of Eastern classical types of liberation, maybe a better word for it than awakening or than enlightenment. Those are kind of more modern terms. Liberation is a bit more close to what we're talking about. And a lot of it is liberation from suffering, and it's liberation from being so bought into this temporary self. We want to do ourselves a favor in our lives if we're on this specific path of liberation, which is a real path, has real effects, benefits, and drawbacks. And I'm sure plenty of you coming to this video are probably aware of that, but many of you might not be so aware of that. So, anyway, we're getting into how does our temporary self cause problems? How does our more fundamental self solve those problems? So let's get into it. So, again, with the example of water, I hinted upon the idea that we can be attached to the water when we perceive something as good through the eyes of our temporary self, through the jiva. If we see something as good, it's a goodie, so of course we're going to want to hold it tight. And in that holding of something tight, we're going to create a tight feeling, a feeling of a sort of resistance. And it's a resistance to losing that desired thing. But let's say another example, nicotine. Nicotine bad, right? Of course, many people know nicotine has some negative effects, especially when we talk about the different routes of administration. I'm fairly certain there's new studies coming out pretty often about how bad vaping is for you. Luckily, I'm addicted to it regardless of what studies come out, so we'll see what happens with that. For right now, I'm enjoying it. Maybe getting closer to quitting one day. But either way, so if we look at something as bad, we can become aversive to this. We say instead of holding nicotine tight, we want to push it away. That also creates a sort of friction because it all comes down to we feel like this human thing is real and really, really, really matters. Not just that it matters. We get caught up into it mattering so much, we actually get caught up into this state of self-absorption into our temporary self. And when that happens, the friction and the resistance that occurs within our very own experience of reality goes up and up and up. As we want the water more, as we're in some desert, we cling to that water, the idea of the water, and the idea that we want water and we need water, but we don't have water. That's the problem. And why is that such a problem? Why is it a problem that we might want something good such as water? The problem is we will not always have what's good, and we will not always be free from what is bad in our own way of interpreting reality subjectively and directly. We directly and subjectively measure out reality in a way that creates a very stable seeming, real seeming, and more or less dangerous illusion that we have things to gain and we have things to lose. And these things are high stakes endeavors. And that we could lose something that we desire heavily, or that we could gain something that we don't want. All of this is getting into what are, things talked about in Buddhist circles a lot. This whole attachment or desire, and then on the other hand, the aversion. This all creates resistance because of this thing known as clinging. There's even the idea in, this is discussed in Rob Burbea's book, Seeing That Frees, Meditations on Emptiness and Dependent Arising. In that book, which I've reviewed a bit on my channel, and people seem to get something good out of that video, so you could check that video out if you're interested. But Rob Burbea goes pretty deep into this idea of clinging actually being something which sort of generates our experience, or at the very least, generates our experience in the way that we feel and interact with it. Think about it. There can be water, and there can be this temporary self. All of that is kind of fine. When when we cling more and more to the water, we're going to want it more and more. And the problem as well that I meant to mention a little earlier, but we'll get to now. The problem is not that even if we had an endless supply of water, the clinging and the sort of that desire that we want something, when it gets fulfilled, it doesn't get fulfilled in any permanently satisfying way. And this gets more into the concept of dukkha, or, this stress, this suffering, this resistance that is inherent to experience itself, according to Buddhism. Even if we had an infinite supply of water and water was all we wanted, that probably would still translate into an experience which is not fully satisfied. Because as you get more and more of something you want, don't you eventually care about it less and less? Doesn't it satisfy you less and less? At least in many instances, if not all. Can't you admit that to yourself? Like, if I love nicotine and I hit this nicotine, it might feel great the first few seconds. But if I keep hitting the nicotine, I'm not even going to want it at a certain point. I will not want to have anything to do with it. And this also goes to water. If you drank gallons and gallons of water, not only can that kill you in the acute short term, you can actually drown yourself, kill yourself by drinking too much water. You're probably aware of that, or if you're not, there's a fun fact for you. Look it up. It's true. So, we as temporary Jivas can't be permanently satisfied by temporary things. That's the real thing we need to look into. And this is getting back to why Jivas are gay as fuck. It's because Jivas will never be the solution themselves. But if we're able to see reality through that lens of the true nature, and we see that there's no need for this illusion of measurement, and we can let the Jiva do what it does best and do Jiva activities and have Jiva desires and be unfulfilled in a Jiva sort of way. If we can let that activity happen, but we can do it from the lens of a deep realization of what that true nature really is, that is always present in any experience, that Atman, or you could say it's the culmination of Dzogchen practice, being done and being done with this push and pull of wanting things and running away from things, and we actually add a sort of meta, all-encompassing level. Even at the level of our direct perception, we let go from trying to construct this experience in the way we particularly as a Jiva want it, if we can let go of the Jiva being so involved and just let it naturally do its things. If we go back to the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says directly in the Bhagavad Gita, more or less, that, this is me not saying it verbatim, which would be hard anyway because of various translations. But the idea is, Krishna even points out that our material existence, our self-structure, is going to run itself to some degree. This activity will never stop. What we must stop is buying so deeply into this activity. We have to stop buying in to the idea that this is such a high stakes game. And that can be really hard to do, especially for people in very, very engaging sort of duties. Like if you're a parent, it's not even necessarily the right thing to like let go to the extent where you would neglect your child. That's not what we're talking about when we say let go of the Jiva. Let go of that side of us that is temporary and loves to measure things and sort of orchestrate the perfect existence for ourselves, which never works out. What I'm saying here is more that if we can see reality from the peace, tranquility, and bliss of our true nature, realizing that many things will come and go. They will be experienced as positive, as negative, as neutral, and many things in between. Many different shades of those three. We can have that activity go on, and we can abide more and more in that true nature, allowing the Jiva to do what it does best. If you're a mother or a father and you're a person of integrity, you're going to take care of your kid no matter what, pretty much. Almost the whole world could be against you for a lot of, even everyday mothers and fathers out there. You don't have to be the best dad or mom on the planet to really care about your child in a self-sacrificing way. That's just kind of our nature. That is more or less the jiva of a decent person. That's their nature. Decent in the relative human sense. They're going to care after their kid. And if we can abide in that true nature and realize that there is peace in this chaos of jiva activity, you're going to take care of your kids just fine, but you're probably going to be less stressed out as you do it. Now, all of this is easier said than done. A big reason why I chose this topic as my first sort of longer video to come back to YouTube with in a while is because I've been struggling a lot with stress and frustration, and I've just been working more hours and been way too active and engaged in all of the temporary stuff that's going to pass in my life. All these different work engagements and responsibilities and duties. Me is a lot of the time I am a bit of a perfectionist, or maybe more than a bit, maybe way too much of a perfectionist. And I get caught up in this illusion of measurement and trying to control everything. I get caught up in this real deep. And even if I've had many, many different transformative experiences and even more or less permanent shifts into realizing the non-dual nature of things, even if I've made a lot of progress on that path, and even if I've been at it for a decade, which I have been going really, really doing my best to try to progress on this non-dual spiritual path for a decade now. And now I'm finally getting to a point where I realize there were many moments where I was riding spiritual highs or having temporarily blissful experiences that were awesome. And I really judged myself as being so awakened, so enlightened, so liberated. And while in the moment that really was an authentic experience, it felt to be true so much. I'm getting into this topic of Jivas are gay as fuck because um, even if you have a good deal of realization on this particular sort of spiritual path, you can easily get pulled back into Maya and into being a Jiva, and you can get pulled back into all of this difficult stuff when we really just grasp onto reality and try to drive it like a ship or a car or a plane. We try to steer it where we want it to go, but fuck, as a Jiva, we don't really even know what's best for us a lot of the time. We do not have all the answers even for ourselves as Jivas. And it's no wonder why, when operating from that Jiva mode of being, it is no wonder why we suffer so much, why we cause so many problems for ourselves just through our way of interpreting and perceiving things. It's sad, but it's also beautiful because as I'm getting deeper into my spiritual path and progressing over time, I'm seeing more and more that it's not about these temporary blissful experiences. It's not about these spiritual highs. What really matters is, yes, get your realization, get your experiences of different levels of realization and get them over and over and over again and get to a point where you can embody it more and more in your everyday life, moment to moment. Yes, that's amazing. But even the idea that there is bondage and liberation, or suffering and freedom from suffering, all of this is still a bit of an incorrect understanding. The true culmination of many of these Eastern spiritual paths, which I'm a huge fan of and love practicing, uh, especially Buddhism, probably primarily, is one I know most about, but Hinduism maybe is a close second. I've practiced in both of those with teachers, through sorts of lineages, even. We could drop those things, I could say, oh, yeah, I've learned from these great, legitimate sources. Like that matters. But anyway, so when we're on this path towards this sort of non-dual awakening, eventually, later on, we must see that our experiences of liberation were a lie. They were a misunderstanding. Because if things are truly non-dual by nature, and that is the only nature we're in, there is not a bonded, suffering version of that nature. There is only that nature, only that beauty, and that amazing, immaculate game going on that has no problems. Even when, as a Jiva, we're suffering hardcore, that is not actually suffering hardcore. That is the non-dual reality and fundamental nature of what experience is just playing itself out. And there's actually no problems from that ultimate, all the way non-dual perspective where there's not even liberation. There's not an awakening or an unawakened state. There's only what is happening. And what is happening is not a real stable thing that is happening that we can point to and say this is the fundamental reality. The best way to say it is there's an imaginary ocean, we can say. It's not in reality an ocean, but we're just swimming in that ocean, moving around. There's activity apparently in this ocean. It appears to be happening that there's activity, good, bad, evil, success, failure. All of that seems like it's really going on, but there's not even an ocean that it's happening in. There's literally no substance to any of this. If you look at the closest part of your experience, you'll see that it doesn't last for even an instant. Even the smallest part of your direct experience doesn't last long enough to point to it and then to rely upon it as a stable thing. And this is why it's better to just let go and let yourself be yourself as you naturally are going to be, even if that's feeling like you're a Jiva, feeling stressed out, feeling frustrated, feeling unsuccessful, feeling insufficient, even if all of that's going on, even if on a very physical, measurable level, your cortisol levels are going up, your adrenaline's going up, you're amped up, you're stressed, you're feeling under threat, even in everyday simple scenarios. Even if that's happening, it is the same ultimate nature which is going to occur whether we think it's occurring or not. It's going to be beautiful whether we perceive it or its beauty or not. And this is the beauty, is that you can finally let go of that activity of clinging to the steering wheel and trying to drive whatever vessel you're in. We could say the Jiva's a vessel. If you're clinging onto that Jiva and what it wants and what it doesn't want, and you're trying to steer in a certain way, maybe we can just relax that activity, relax that game, that temporary part of the game. And as we relax it, the same, very similar types of activity will appear to happen to us, to the Jiva. The Jiva will go about its life. The Jiva will do whatever it does, and there's no reality to the Jiva at the end of the day to even control itself. The Jiva is not all of reality, and the Jiva itself does not have a will apart from its own will. The Jiva's will comes from its own nature, which is not something that the Jiva totally gives and controls itself. The whole world is tied into you, and you are tied into the whole world. Even in a scientific sense, if you look close enough, everything is connected. And even the smallest thing has an impact and has ties into the rest of the universe, multiverse, whatever. Experience itself is tied together. All of these different parts are tied together, and the Jiva is just going to do its thing. Don't stress about it, because it will pass. It will feel good, it will feel bad. But if at a deeper level you can realize that you're not just the Jiva, and you can abide in that peace of the Atman, or of the boundless emptiness occurring, whatever we want to call it. Atman isn't the right way to say it. Non-Jiva is not the right way to say it. Tao is not the right way to say it. Brahman is not the right way to say it. Anatta is not the right way to say it. Sunyata is not the right way to say it. The culmination of Panya, or it should also in Sanskrit be prajna, I think. Um, wisdom, the culmination of wisdom, that is not a name that works because there's not a thing that we're pointing to. This is so transcendent that it is so everyday and ordinary. And the truth about awakening and progressing in a spiritual way along these paths, the truth is that it's not about even realization. You can realize it, you can realize the truth more and more aspects of it. You can keep going deeper, but things will be as they are, and that is the same way they were before you ever heard about any of these paths or had any direct realization or had any inkling of an intuition that there was any of this sort of stuff. Reality was the same then. Reality is the same now. There are merely different scenes and characters on the screen. There are different colors and shapes on the canvas than there were. There's still the same canvas, but again, that's just sort of metaphor. There isn't a canvas, and there isn't there aren't appearances occurring on that canvas. There's just what is. But what is isn't even the right way to say it either, because saying what is makes it seem like there's something that really is, and that's part of a problem because what is doesn't last for even an instant, and there's no way to verify that there's some fixed picture of consciousness as it was in one instant. Consciousness relies on form. It relies upon your perception of the form. It relies upon the tiniest particle of, or we could say qualia, the tiniest little piece of your subjective experience. Well, the thing is, that tiniest little piece is going to change no matter what tiny piece we look at. It's changing, it's fluxing, it's moving, but there's not even a stable thing that doesn't move that we could point to for it to make any sense for us to say that there's movement. There is nothing to be said about this. There's actually, at the end of the day, kind of nothing helpful about having these realizations. But at the same time, it's also like ultimately helpful. If you can be in a state of experience where you are at one with the realization of the non-duality of reality, which ain't even real necessarily, if you can abide in that true nature as a jiva, as a temporary self, and you just let the show go on. You stop yelling in the middle of the movie theater, pissed off about what's on the screen. Like, that's another way of saying let go, just abide in true nature, and you can be happy. But yeah, the real work when it comes to this sort of awakening path, this sort of liberation path, the real work comes not in just realizing that these things are true on an intellectual level. It goes beyond realizing that they're true on a perceptual level. It goes beyond this realization of the way things are and how they actually are. It goes beyond realizing that at the most visceral, sensate level that is unavoidable and totally more or less constant. It goes beyond that because there's really just there's nothing you can improve at the end of the day with with the way things really are. They just really are that way. But yeah, what I wanted to say is the bulk of the spiritual path, I'm seeing this more and more, is about integrating this, your different levels of realization. It's about integrating, bring that that equanimity and that peace and that bliss that is there from the side of seeing things through the true nature, through the more or less eternal way things are or aren't, just the way that this dance is. When you see the way that the dance of life is going on, the dance of life and death and anything else, when you see the way that that works and you feel the benefit directly of that realization, then you need to take that realization and bring it on back to your jiva. Let your jiva be calmed by the realization. Let your jiva find a way to also abide in the peace and equanimity and tranquility and love, and just let it be in that realization too. Let the two things that we used to buy into, the illusion of suffering and the liberation from it, or the illusion of a false self and the realization of a true self, just get yourself more and more, uh, what's the right word? More and more. I can't, the words on the tip of my tongue. Just get yourself more familiar. That's the meaning, same meaning. Get yourself more familiar with that side of really viewing things in a way that you can deeply feel and trust through the lens of the true nature, when you're really at peace and in love with life, beyond just the personal self being in love with life. Get real deep into that. Go deeper and deeper and just keep doing it. And also just, you're gonna get sucked back into Jiva life and be stressed as fuck and freaking out at certain times. But just remember this, the the realization of how things really are is always there. And this relative reality and experience is actually always there too. The most absolute temporary experience is more or less just a relative thing happening that's passing anyway. So just go deeper into your worldly life. This could be sort of a way of talking about karma yoga too. Go deeply into the duties that you have as a jiva. Go deeply into that and experience all the pains and failures that come from trying to improve the world, trying to be a positive thing in the world, trying to make it better. Or even if you're completely evil, if you go into trying to destroy the world, like whatever your nature is going to bring you to, that you wouldn't be able to escape anyway, because there isn't actually a person in the seat who really is separate from the rest of this, who can control one thing or another. Just, you can go deeply into those duties that your temporary self feels like it must do. And it feels like will make things better. And in a relative jiva way, it will make things better for a time. Let all that activity occur. Go forthright. Go deep into that temporary self too. Just take it all on and go deep into life and push forward. And remember that the true self realization is always there. The true nature realization is always there too. And eventually, you're going to find more and more harmony between those two different ways of seeing things, until you get closer and closer to there not even being two different separate ways of seeing things. You're just going to see things as they are, and life will occur, and for better or worse, you will go about that life, and you will pretty much do your best as a jiva. Even when we feel like we're not doing our best, I really do think we're trying in some way to hold it together as our temporary selves. We give a valiant effort. Even in our failures, we give a valiant effort to trying to make things the better way, the more virtuous way of living. Even in people who are completely evil, um, they're trying to orchestrate things in a way that feels better in their experience. Um, and we as people with differing interests, differing relative human interests, differing jiva interests, we can judge their activities as bad. But really, we're all just sort of stuck operating as who we are. We can't escape that. We really can't. At least whenever we're in experience. Experience is just going to happen how it happens. And we can think that we're controlling that. We can think that we're some amazing person who's just like got the most amazing will and we're doing everything right. But even if you are that person, you're just the coolest, nicest, most positive person ever. That's not really because of just you. That's probably because you maybe had good genetics, for one. You started with like a decent physical template as a human being where you weren't without four limbs at birth or something, or, weren't going to die in an uncontrollable way within like a year of being born. Like, you have to get some type of decent roll of the dice, even on a physical level, to get to where you would be seen as like this virtuous um, person really doing good in the world. You have to get that good roll. And then there are some things with your psychology and temperament which are not all in your control. They were gifted to you, more or less, as well as your family that you're born into. Or maybe it's also the challenges that you ran into that helped build you into who you are to be some virtuous, awesome person. You didn't necessarily get to pick those challenges, not every single one. You didn't get to orchestrate it all. What I'm trying to say is, even if we find ourselves in a great situation where we are genuinely good people and we're trying to do good in the world, we must not let that get to our heads and think that we were the ones who created all that. Much of life is a gift to us. Now, that might be a gift that we would like to reject. Maybe it's a very difficult life. Maybe you've got a very serious illness, or you're born into very difficult life circumstances. There's war on the horizon, or maybe at your doorstep, or maybe in your bedroom. Um, all kinds of crazy maladies can happen in experience as a human being. But you're not responsible for all of it. Do your best moving forward. This kind of gets into um, the what's called like the first training in Buddhism of the three. So there's sila, the first training, which can roughly be translated into morality or just developing yourself. It's kind of developing the jiva to be a better, more peaceful, more beneficial jiva. Um, Developing that jiva, that doing sila practice, trying to become a better person. That's such a basic thing. It's way more fundamental than a lot of what these awakening journeys turn into. Like, this is something that's going to be in every single person's life, no matter what. You've got to develop yourself as a person, as a character. That's so fundamental. Because if you're just a horrible person falling apart at the seams, um, it's not going to help you on a spiritual path much at all. It's probably going to hurt, make things a lot harder, make your whole life harder. So we've got to do that first. It's important, but we kind of can remember and be humble in that process, and just keep in mind that a lot of the good things that we're fortunate enough to do, we are fortunate to have the ability to try to become better people, and have a real shot at it. We're fortunate to be in a lot of the circumstances that we are, especially in the modern world, with a lot of diseases getting controlled over time, with the world becoming overall, in many ways, more peaceful, with us surviving longer. A lot of good things are coming, and we just have to remember, even if we find ourselves doing great things and being very nice, positive people, it's not just through our own efforts that we do that. I don't know, that was a bit of a tangent, which I didn't really foresee happening in this video, but I think it still has some benefit, if you you know go through it in the right way. I'm not trying to equate bad actions and good actions at the relative human level. I'm not trying to equate them at all. That's not what the point of this is. It's more just to say there are things beyond our individual selves which enable our individual temporary human selves to behave in certain ways. At the end of the day, all of experience and all of life is tied together, um, just the way it works. And we can't escape that. Um, so go forward with some humility, even when you're doing the right thing. Remember, I'm lucky enough to be able to do the right thing right now. And there will be moments where maybe you're not that lucky and you just can't seem to get it together enough to do what you would personally see as the right, virtuous, moral action in the moment. And when that happens, don't beat yourself up too much, because that'll just probably make you do worse in the future. We got to have some self-love. We got to be kind to ourselves. That's another thing. As we get caught up a bit too much in the Jiva games and see too much reality and high stakesness in it, um, we can throw ourselves off track. If we make one misstep, we can let that turn into negativity, and that's not good. So, yeah, just a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different things that I brought up here. I hope that it was beneficial. I think I'm going to go ahead and just end things here. I know this might not appear to be the most structured video to some of you guys. I mean, this is kind of how I for better or worse, this is how I make my videos. I might have an idea. I might even think of some structure of what things I'd like to talk about, and then I'm just going to talk about stuff for a while. It's just going to kind of come out. I'm not going to have the most control over it, and hopefully it ends up being of benefit to someone out there. If it does, if it benefits someone and it doesn't harm people in any huge way, that's enough for me to make this video. So I just hope it's helped someone out there to maybe understand some of this awakening stuff a bit more. But yeah, just remember, integrate. That's the real work. Awakening is only the beginning. Integration is the eternal task, sort of, or at least for this life. It's a lifelong task to integrate and to elevate yourself at the relative level and at the level of realizing the absolute. It's all, at the end of the day, the same thing. Just relax, smile, and just know that it's a fun game if you can stop hating it based on your personal preferences. Easier said than done. I'll see you guys next time.